G'day guys, and today, a bit of a one-off video which I want to do when I find something really interesting that I wish to share with people. So today I want to relate to you guys an interesting mechanism of addiction. Now most people tend to associate addiction with drugs, and a drug is simply a stimulus for a biochemical reaction in your brain involving neurotransmitters. It should be of course noted that drugs, natural or synthetic, are obviously not the only things capable of producing reactions in this manner. So when looking at addictions, we have to get down to a place in the brain known as the neural synapse. There are billions of these throughout the brain, as a neural synapse is simply the meeting point between two nerves. Now when a drug is taken, or a stimulus is given for a biochemical reaction, a couple different things can happen. The stimulation required for neurotransmitter release can be lowered, so more of the new neurotransmitter is released into the synaptic cleft between the two nerves. Neurotransmitter reuptake can also be inhibited. The neurotransmitter cloud hangs around for longer in the synaptic cleft, continuously stimulating the postsynaptic neuron. Of course, the stimulated effect depends on the type of drugs. There are many classifications of drugs. We can think of stimulants, depressants, and hallucinogens, and each drug within those categories has a different effect, which likely pertains to its chemical structure. Why doesn't cocaine have the exact same effect as ecstasy? And why doesn't marijuana have the exact same effect as opium or heroin? And I'm going to go ahead and guess that this function of what occurs when you take this drug is down to its structure, but this is quite specific and beyond the scope of this video. What we want to look at is addiction. Now, as a general rule of thumb, the faster the drug hits the brain and the quicker it leaves, the more addictive it is. Now, the speed of which a drug hits the brain is largely dependent on its method of transportation to the brain. We can think of an obvious example, which is the difference between smoking marijuana, which takes a few minutes to hit the brain, and eating a marijuana edible, which can take several hours to reach the brain, resulting in funny stories I'm sure you've heard in which people don't think the marijuana edible is working and they keep scoffing them down, and then suddenly it all slams into them at once and they have a total potato freakout. Drugs that are eaten seem to reach the brain the slowest, while drugs that are intravenously injected seem to reach the brain the quickest, taking under a minute to get all the way from the vein to the brain. The speed a drug leaves the brain is, in my mind, mostly dependent on its chemical structure. The human body is simply more effective at metabolizing certain structures to the point where they have a negligible effect. For this, we can compare caffeine with marijuana. Now, your morning cup of coffee has usually worn off by the afternoon. You don't feel the stimulating effects of the caffeine, but the day after smoking marijuana, you still may feel a bit sluggish. So that's sort of a general overview of that rule of thumb, but I do want to go ahead and give you a specific example. Now what we're going to do is we're going to compare cocaine with chewing coca leaves. Now of course they're both derived from the same thing, I think we all know that, the coca plant, but let's have a look and see how addictive each method of taking the drug is when we have a look at their method of uptake and the length of their high. So first let's look at cocaine when snorted. Now the uptake speed of cocaine when snorted is very quick. It takes only a handful of minutes for it to reach the brain. It has a hyperstimulating effect. It inhibits your dopamine reuptake, so you feel very happy and euphoric and love everyone, that sort of thing. And it also has an effect of increasing your metabolism, so your heart rate jumps up, blood pressure, etc., etc. Maybe that's why you feel so energized and you want to dance and that sort of thing. So cocaine has a very shortish high, I'd say, at 15 to 45 minutes, although some users report that they still feel the effects many hours after taking it, and it generally peaks after 30 minutes. There's of course quite a bit of variance with when people peak and how long things last, because we all have a different rate of metabolism essentially. And so what's interesting is cocaine is highly addictive. So let's compare this to coca leaves. So coca leaves, basically what you do is you stick a bunch of them in your mouth and you chew away from them for many hours. And it takes a couple of hours for the chemical effect to occur within your brain, and you have to continuously chew this whole time. So it's like gum, but leaves, which, must be pleasant. As opposed to cocaine, it only has a mildly stimulating effect. It suppresses pain, hunger, fatigue, and thirst, and also has a side effect of alleviating altitude sickness. So it's somewhat comparable to caffeine. Having your coffee suppresses your hunger, fatigue, and thirst, that sort of thing. It allows you to work for longer and be more alert and that sort of thing. So the length of coca leaves is of course dose dependent, but since people chew it continuously for ages and ages, the high often lasts many, many hours. It should be noted that its addiction potential is virtually non-existent. Now without the rule of thumb that I've explained before, this may appear confusing because it's the same derivative it's coming from the same plant, so why are these things so different? But now that we know that when we look at cocaine and we have a look at its uptake speed, it's very rapid, and when we have a look at the length of its high, it departs very quickly too. So we can see that cocaine is more addictive than chewing coca leaves because of this. It comes very quickly and it leaves very quickly, leaving you wanting more. And we can expand on this by looking at a chart of how addictive drugs are, scale, that sort of thing. And if we look down the bottom, all the drugs we can see have a very slow effect to start. Marijuana, shrooms, LSD, that sort of thing. They do take a while to kick in. Indeed, with some of these drugs, you can actually still be waiting to kick in by the time the cocaine user is peaking. And indeed with hallucinogens, I'm not entirely sure which ones specifically, but I know that some of them can actually have an anti-addictive effect, and the thought of taking it after you've had your trip is very repulsive and you don't want to do it. But then we get to the top of the chart and we have your crack cocaines, your alcohol, and your cigarettes, that sort of thing. Where charts actually include alcohol and cigarettes, some of them don't because they're legal and that makes them fine, or some ridiculous stunt like that. And what we notice is that these drugs hit the brain very quickly. Crack cocaine, when injected, reaches the brain within seconds. Alcohol, depending on its method of entry, its concentration essentially, but it takes about 7 minutes for, I believe, hard liquor to reach your brain and that sort of thing because it's absorbed directly through the stomach lining. And cigarettes, I believe, takes about a few minutes. So all these drugs, the method of uptake, the speed of uptake to the brain is very rapid, and this gives an insight as to why they're so addictive. And that is about the extent of my ramblings within this video. I hope you're able to derive some kind of value from this recording. Perhaps this is new information, or maybe you're revisiting an old topic. Certainly when it comes to taking drugs, I believe everyone should be well informed, prepared, read up on what you're going to do, etc, etc. But regardless of what you're going to do with this video, I thank you all for sticking around and implore you all to have a good one.